Obinna was born in a small, quiet village in eastern Nigeria. A place where life followed the rhythm of the sun and the seasons. His father, a strict schoolteacher, believed that discipline was the backbone of character. And so the household was rigid, ruled by schedules, memorization, and the sharp sting of correction when mistakes were made. Meals were practical, designed to last through the week, rather than to delight the senses. It was always heavily salted and simple. But they were eaten in silence. Except for the occasional reminder from his father that complaining was a sign of weakness. Even as a boy, Obinna had a sensitivity to discomfort that others dismissed. Headaches would pound behind his eyes, and his chest would ache after long runs to fetch water or tend to the farm. But in his village, health was not a topic of conversation. Pain was swallowed. Prayers were whispered. And herbs were chewed for relief. Strong men do not complain, his father would intone, and Obinna memorized that lesson like a sacred truth. Weakness, he learned, was a liability. School offered both refuge and challenge. Obinna was bright, curious, and determined to rise above the constraints of village life. While others played after classes, he stayed behind, poring over books borrowed from his father or the small school library. He knew that education was his ticket out, his only real chance to escape the cycle of struggle. In the quiet nights of his youth, he swore to himself that he would leave. That Lagos, with all its chaos and possibility, awaited him. Yet, even in ambition, life in the village left its mark. Obinna carried stress as naturally as he carried the school bag on his small shoulders. Every visit from distant relatives was a reminder of obligations he could barely meet. Every neighbor's request for help with money, food, or labor was a test of endurance. Though he longed to leave, he also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, shaping his sense of duty and the resilience that would define him for years to come. By the time he was 16, Obinna had decided. Lagos would be his proving ground. With a scholarship to King's School Lagos and the promise of free university education, he gathered his few belongings into a small bag and boarded the bus that would carry him to a city pulsing with light, noise, and possibility. Leaving the village, he told himself, "This is not just an escape. It is an act of survival. A pursuit of life beyond the limitations I have always known." Little did he know. The challenges of Lagos would test him in ways no village ever could. The first glimpse of Lagos overwhelmed him. The city stretched endlessly, a chaotic tapestry of lights, sounds, and smells. Horns blared in unrelenting symphony. Street vendors shouted above the din, and neon signs reflected in puddles from the last night's rain. Obinna felt both terror and exhilaration. This was a city that demanded speed, cunning, and resilience. It demanded that one fight for every inch of ground. University life was a revelation. King's School Lagos was alive with ambition, energy, and competition. Students hurried between lectures, cafes, and libraries. Always calculating the next step, always chasing the next opportunity. Obinna's scholarship made him both proud and anxious. He could not afford to fail. Nights were spent in the library, mornings in crowded lecture halls, and every day carried the unspoken pressure to excel. Failure, in Lagos, was both public and permanent. Yet, amid the chaos, friendships were formed. He met people from every corner of Nigeria and beyond, each with their own dreams and burdens. They shared meals, notes, and laughter. Obinna learned that life here required adaptation, not just intelligence, but social agility, timing, and even street sense. Every small victory, a well-earned grade or even a successful presentation, fueled the fire inside him. When he graduated, Lagos had already changed him. He was sharper, quicker, and more attuned to opportunity. Landing a job at a commercial bank was both relief and the beginning of a new struggle. The office was a battlefield. And every target miss felt like a personal failure. Long hours became the norm. Coffee and energy drinks replaced meals. Obinna's ambition was relentless, his self-expectations unforgiving. He believed that endurance equaled strength, that exhaustion was proof of worth. In the evenings, when he finally stepped into his small apartment, Lagos lights twinkled like 1,000 eyes watching his progress. But the city also whispered warnings that Obinna ignored. The pounding headaches. The chest tightness. The tremors in his hands. Each symptom he brushed aside, a silent price paid for ambition. A reminder that Lagos rewards the tireless and punishes the unaware. It was during one of Lagos' glittering evenings that he met Nana. She was from Ikoyi. Elegant, poised, and confident. A woman whose presence commanded attention without demanding it. Their romance was cinematic. Dinners overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Weekend getaways in Dubai. Social events where their arrival turned hates. Obinna felt that with her, his life was finally complete. The courtship was fast, intoxicating. Nana was not just a partner, she became a symbol of the life Obinna had dreamed of since childhood. Together, they navigated the corridors of wealth and influence, attending events where smiles hid whispered judgments. Obinna, once a boy from a village who feared weakness, now felt invincible. He had it all, or so it seemed. Marriage, when it came, was the pinnacle of this success. Their ceremony was lavish, covered in society columns, celebrated by friends and strangers alike. They moved into a mansion on Victoria Island, bought luxury cars, and became a couple that others measured themselves against. To Lagos, they were perfect. Power couple. Success story. Social media gold. But perfection is often a mask. Behind the marble floors and designer interiors, Obinna felt an unfamiliar tension. His body, long accustomed to silence, began to rebel. Headaches that had been minor whispers grew sharper. His temper, once controlled, flared over trivial matters. Nana noticed. Gently but persistently, urging him to see a doctor. Each time, he waved her concern away. "I'm fine. Just stress." Lagos stress, he would say. But the lie was thin. He was too proud, too conditioned to ignore weakness, to admit fragility. In a city where appearances mattered as much as results, vulnerability was a dangerous luxury. And so, he continued. Each sleepless night. Each skip meal. Each roadside suyo washed down with beer, ignoring the silent tally his body was keeping. Life in the mansion seemed flawless to outsiders. Nana moved with grace. Hosting elegant dinners. Managing household affairs with precision. And ensuring their social media presence reflected a story of perfection. Obinna, meanwhile, continued to chase success at the bank, where deadlines and targets were relentless. On the surface, they were Lagos' power couple. The envy of friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives. Yet beneath the polished veneer, cracks were forming. Obinna's headaches grew worse. They no longer arrived as subtle whispers. Now they struck like hammers, pounding relentlessly behind his eyes and across his temples. Nights of restless sleep became frequent. Sometimes he would wake drenched in sweat, heart racing and eyes wide in panic. Nana observed these changes with growing alarm. She noticed the lines of tension etched deeper into his face. The flickers of irritability over minor issues. The way he recoiled when she suggested rest. Yet he refused help. Each doctor's visit he avoided was a silent vow to himself: weakness was unacceptable. He laughed off concern at work, masking symptoms with humor and feigned composure. His colleagues noticed. Whispers about his temper began to circulate. Some said he was burning out. Others said he was losing control. But Obinna could not, or would not, stop. To him, stopping was surrender. Lagos, he believed, rewarded the relentless. Meanwhile, family calls from his village intensified. School fees, medical bills, weddings, funerals, each demand felt heavier than the last. Obinna loved his family dearly, but the weight of expectation, the constant reminder of his obligations, began to suffocate him. The city's chaos was mirrored by the emotional chaos of responsibility he carried from home. His body, however, bore the heaviest burden, silently accumulating strain he refused to acknowledge. And yet, the glitter of success continued to lure him. Business deals closed, promotions dangled, and the illusion of control kept him going. Obinna lived in a constant tension between ambition and warning signs. Each sleepless night, each skipped meal, each bottle of alcohol or roadside suya was a step deeper into a pattern he could not, or would not, break. The cracks were invisible to the world, but inside, they were widening. It was during an ordinary Thursday at the bank that Obinna first truly felt the warning signs. He was seated at his desk, reviewing financial reports with numbers and percentages blurring before his eyes. The pounding in his head had escalated into a drumbeat that refused to relent. His chest tightened, and a cold sweat formed along his hairline. Normally unflappable, he felt a rare wave of vulnerability, one that made him pause. Instead of seeking help, he swallowed 2 paracetamol tablets and returned to his work, ignoring the warning. Stress, he told himself. Just stress. Nothing more. He convinced himself that admitting weakness would undo years of effort, would shatter the image he had built for Nana, for the bank, for the village. Silence became his shield, stubbornness his armor. But the body whispers before it screams. Days turned into weeks, and Obinna's condition worsened. Simple errands exhausted him. Evening drinks to relax only worsened fatigue. His irritability, once manageable, now caused tension with colleagues. Nana's gentle concerns escalated into urgent pleas. Obinna, please see a doctor. You cannot ignore this, she said one night, her voice shaking with worry. He laughed it off, masking fear with pride. Even in the quiet moments, the city's pulse felt like a threat. Lagos never sleeps, and the demands it imposed were relentless. Traffic jams, deadlines, social obligations, family pressures, all converged to create a life of constant motion. Obinna's silence, his refusal to acknowledge weakness, became a dangerous echo chamber. Every pounding headache, every heart flinch, every moment of dizziness was a note in a symphony of ignored signals. Obinna's denial was not arrogance, it was survival. Years in the village had taught him that weakness invited judgment. Lagos had reinforced that endurance equaled value. So he endured. Until one evening, on the third mainland bridge, endurance nearly cost him everything. The evening was humid, the Lagos sky streaked with fading gold. Obinna was driving home after a long day at the bank, mind buzzing with deadlines and deals. The bridge stretched before him, the usual cacophony of horns and brake lights a dull background to his thoughts. And then, suddenly, his vision blurred. The pounding in his head intensified into unbearable pressure. His chest tightened painfully, making every breath a struggle. Panic surged as his hands trembled on the steering wheel. For a brief, terrifying moment, he lost control of the car. Sweat poured down his face, his heart racing. Lagos, in all its chaos, became a nightmare corridor of lights and sound. He managed to pull over, shaking, gasping, and clutching the wheel. But instead of seeking medical help, he did the only thing he knew: he downplayed it. 2 paracetamol tablets later, he assured himself it was nothing. Just stress. Lagos stress, he whispered. The city moved around him, indifferent, oblivious to the silent crisis unfolding in a wealthy banker's body. That night, Nana found him tossing and turning, soaked in sweat, his pulse erratic. She begged once again, tears in her eyes. "Obinna. Please, you need a doctor." He brushed her off with a weary laugh, promising it would pass. Yet, in the quiet moments, he felt fear. Fear that what he was ignoring might not simply pass. Fear that silence might no longer protect him. It was a turning point, though he did not realize it. The body's whispers had escalated to a scream, and the first collapse on the bridge was a warning he still refused to heed. Lagos continued its relentless rhythm. But inside, Obinna's life was quietly unraveling. One heartbeat at a time. Weeks later, Obinna found himself reluctantly participating in a company health outreach. It was an event he had avoided, viewing it as a distraction from more pressing work. A nurse took his blood pressure. A routine procedure he barely paid attention to. But when the cuff tightened around his arm, her expression changed. "Sir, your blood pressure is 180/120. This is very dangerous," she said softly, her eyes serious. The words hit him. But he did not respond. Hypotension. High blood pressure. The silent killer. He had read about it but never imagined it would claim him as a patient. He laughed it off in front of colleagues, making a joke about stress and late nights. He did not call Nana. He did not change his habits. The warnings were ignored. Hidden beneath pride and fear. Even as his body screamed for attention, his mind rationalized it away. Strength, he reminded himself, meant continuing regardless of pain. At home, the quiet moments became moments of unease. Every pounding headache, every dizzy spell, every flare of anger reminded him that something was wrong. But admitting it would shatter the illusion he had created, the illusion of invincibility, of control and of perfect success. Lagos demanded toughness. And he had internalized that demand so deeply that he could not yield, even to himself. The body, however, is patient only up to a point. And Obinna's body had reached the limit of patience. Hypertension had been stalking him for years, quietly, invisibly, ready to erupt. And when it did, nothing would be the same. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of their Victoria Island mansion, casting long, warm beams across the polished floors. Nana was bustling about, preparing the children for church, her elegant movements masking the worry that had been growing over the past weeks. Obinna, however, felt a heaviness he could no longer ignore. His head throbbed incessantly, and each heartbeat seemed to echo painfully in his chest. He tried to rise from bed, but dizziness overtook him. The world tilted, the floor felt unstable, and for the first time in years, he admitted, not to anyone, but to himself, that he was not fine. Yet stubbornness, habit, and pride kept him from calling a doctor or asking Nana for help. He attempted to move to the living room to join the family, each step an effort against the pounding in his head and the constriction around his chest. Suddenly, everything went dark. Obinna collapsed onto the floor. Nana screamed, her hands reaching for him as he lay there, barely conscious, sweat pouring from his body. The children cried out, their small voices filled with terror and confusion. Panic engulfed the household. Neighbors, alerted by the screams, rushed into the house, faces stricken with concern. The wealth, power, and status that had defined Obinna's life moments ago meant nothing in the face of this sudden fragility. A neighbor called for an ambulance, but the traffic of Lagos is relentless. Nana and a few strong neighbors lifted him into their car, weaving desperately through horns, shouts, and congestion. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every honk a cruel reminder that life in Lagos does not pause for emergencies. Obinna's pulse was erratic, his breathing labored. In those minutes, the reality of mortality pressed down on everyone in the car. By the time they reached the hospital, Obinna's condition had worsened. Doctors rushed him to the emergency unit. Nana clung to his hand, tears streaming freely. The man who had once controlled every corner of his life, the banker who seemed invincible, was now entirely at the mercy of his body. The words of the nurse from weeks ago echoed in the minds of all: hypertension, the silent killer. In the sterile hospital room, the rhythm of beeping machines replaced the ceaseless noise of Lagos streets. Obinna lay on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding and mind racing. The doctor, calm yet firm, delivered the verdict: a hypertensive crisis had led to a mild stroke. Nana's hand trembled in his as tears fell silently, grief, fear, and relief mingling together. For Obinna, the moment was humbling. The man who had once measured success in power, money, and appearances realized that all of it was secondary. Health, he understood now, was the foundation upon which everything else rested. Ambition had blinded him. Pride had delayed action. And Lagos, with its relentless pulse, had only accelerated his downfall. The days that followed were grueling. Physical therapy, blood pressure monitoring, medication schedules, every aspect of life became a study in humility. Obinna learned to listen to the whispers of his body, to honor rest as much as work, to measure strength not by endurance alone but by awareness and care. Nana was steadfast, guiding him through meals, exercises, and medical appointments, her patience and love a steady anchor amid chaos. He also began to confront the emotional burdens he had long ignored. Calls from the village were still frequent, but he learned to set boundaries, explaining carefully what he could and could not do. His family learned that even success has limits, and that caring for oneself is not weakness but necessity. Obinna started to rebuild his life slowly, integrating lessons learned through near tragedy. By the end of the first month in recovery, the man who had once ignored pain was transformed. Not completely healed, but aware, careful, and grateful. He no longer measured life only by external achievements but by balance, by attentiveness, by the silent dialogue with his own body that could no longer be ignored. Months later, Obinna returned home, the mansion on Victoria Island unchanged, but he himself profoundly transformed. Morning walks replaced skipped breakfasts. Home-cooked meals, rich in vegetables and low in salt, became the norm. He meditated, exercised, and checked his blood pressure regularly. The silent killer, hypertension, had not destroyed him, but it had taught him lessons impossible to ignore. He also reshaped his work-life balance. He no longer chased every target at the bank with reckless abandon. Meetings were attended with preparation but not obsession. Coffee was replaced by water, sleepless nights by planned rest. Colleagues noticed the change, his temper eased, his patience grew, and he became a mentor, subtly teaching others the value of listening to the body. Family and community obligations continued, but Obinna approached them differently. He learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize, and to educate others on health awareness. Calls from the village were no longer burdens but opportunities for dialogue about responsibility and well-being. Lagos, for all its chaos, became a place of measured engagement rather than relentless pursuit. Perhaps the most important transformation was internal. Obinna finally understood that strength is not ignoring weakness, that ambition is hollow without care, and that life is fragile regardless of wealth or status. Nana remained by his side, not just as a partner but as a witness to his journey. A reminder that love flourishes when nurtured, not when overshadowed by pride and denial. Hypertension, the silent pressure, had spoken loudly. Obinna had survived. Not because he ignored the warning, but because he ultimately chose to listen. His story became one not of shame, but of caution. A narrative of Lagos life, of ambition, and of the quiet truth: in the race for success, true wealth is health.